Trying to find my questions on my computer. Give me just a second. All right, so I'm just going to start from the top and go down. What did I put? I must have misspelled. Sorry. Okay. Anyways, the first question that I had was, how do you have sex with totally gross people? Do you zone out? And again, these are all my personal answers from my experience. So please don't assume that this is how anybody else feels. This is just my consensus and my personal opinion. So anyways, the question was, how do you have sex with totally gross people and do you zone out? I think that there's a big part of that comes along with the sex industry, especially if you have a trafficker or you have a pimp. There's a lot of grooming involved, and so they do it different ways. One of the ways that one of my pimps groomed me was he let his friends have their way with me to kind of get me broken in and kind of get me used to being treated that way, I guess. So basically, he let them do what they wanted to do to me and basically told me, well, if you can get through this, then you can get through having sex with strangers. So at some point, there came a time when you do zone out and it's completely numbing. And a lot of times that's why drugs are involved, because you can numb yourself out. So I definitely personally did zone out a lot. Sex doesn't become sex, it becomes business, and you're not connected mentally with the person. You don't see a face, you don't see a human, you just see your time. You're constantly counting down from 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever that looks like, whatever, time that they paid for, you're just waiting for the time to count down. And so I don't think it takes very long for you to finally just be able to zone out and kind of not put a face to who you're having sex with. The next question is, how did it all start? And personally, for me, I think it just started with being unaware of what the real world had in store for me. I had no idea that pimps and hoes and prostitution and all of that even existed. So when it was thrown in my face, I had no idea how to tackle the issue. I had no idea how to go about it. I had no idea what the signs to look for were. I had no idea that I was being groomed. I had no idea about any of it. So unawareness was huge, and insecurity. Pimps prey on your insecurities like crazy. They can sense a vulnerable woman from 1,000 miles away and they prey on that. And so they pick what it is that you need, whether they feel like you need love, material things, whatever it is, and they will provide that so that you feel a sense of security with them. And for me, I was insecure. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted somebody to consider me a prize and their possession. And I had a weird sense of getting some type of feeling inside of me that I belonged to somebody else. So I wanted to do everything to keep that feeling. The next question was, what has happened in your life to make you feel like this is what you should be doing? And I don't think that there's ever really a point in your life where you feel like, oh well, I'm just gonna be a prostitute, or I'm just gonna be a stripper, or I'm just gonna be a porn star. Um, I think that what it is a whole list of things that happen. I think it starts from when you're little. I think it your household and how you're brought up plays a huge part. I think that a lot of women have um, absent fathers. I think that a lot of women don't have anything to compare what a good man should treat them like to. So when somebody who is finessing you comes in and gives you that sense of just like security and gives you that sense of love that you've never felt before, it feels good. And even though it's a bad situation for you it feels normal. For you it feels good because you don't have anything to compare it to. So there's tons of ways. I've heard tons of stories. I've met a ton of girls. Usually the overall consensus for women in the sex industry or women that are trafficked, there has been a history of sexual abuse when they're younger or some form of abuse. There's been a history of low self-esteem, absent parents, again, unawareness, and just not having that core mentality of knowing how to respect yourself. And again, that comes from when you're young. But I would say that the overall biggest thing would be sexual abuse, and hiding the sexual abuse. At least as far as a lot of the women that I've met, I had sexual abuse when I was 6. It wasn't ongoing. It was a 2-time thing, and I never thought twice about it because I was so little. I didn't know I didn't know that it was sexual abuse until I grew older and realized that it was wrong, and realized that a lot of issues that I had when I got older stemmed from that. Okay. Anyways, let's see. Next question. Do you understand that none of this is your fault and that you'll always deserve the best from everyone? I personally understand that I made certain choices that led to where I was. I understand that what the other person or other people did to me was not my fault, but I do take responsibility for my part in it. I do take responsibility for not knowing how to address the healing that needed to be done within myself. I do take responsibility for continuing to go back to a destructive lifestyle and continuing to be scared of change. And that was a huge thing. I was scared of change. So I kept going back to what I knew was bad for me. But it was kind of like, I know that this is bad and I know what I'm going back to, but I don't know what the change looks like. So maybe that's going to be worse. Maybe that's going to be harder than what I'm already dealing with. So for me, I was justifying my decisions in my head. So it's kind of a up in the air kind of thing. I do take responsibility for a lot of things that were my fault, that I feel and still to this day feel were my fault, but I do not blame myself any longer for the choices that the other party decided to do, as far as abuse, as far as manipulation, as far as preying on my weaknesses, things like that. So I've learned to forgive, I've learned to let go, and I've learned to understand where my responsibility was and where their responsibility was. The next question is, have you completely given up the game? If you don't know what the game is, that's a slang term for the lifestyle of prostitution, pimping, and hoeing. If so, how did you do it and what was your motivation? I can only speak for myself on this. I have completely given up that lifestyle, not easily. Let me not make that seem like it's an easy thing. I have given it up completely. My motivation being my children and my organization, just for the simple fact that I can't preach to women that there's a better way and a better situation and that there's brighter days for them if I'm still doing that. So that keeps me really grounded, and it keeps me to the point where even when I do feel like giving up and I feel like things are getting overwhelming, God always puts some woman in my life to where she tells me, look, you're really motivating me, and I know that there's better things for me to be doing. And if you can do it, then I can do it. So that always comes right at the right time to where it keeps me from going back into that destructive behavior, and it keeps me from going backwards. So my motivation, like I said, has definitely been my kids and wanting to create a solid foundation for them and wanting to prevent this from ever happening to them, my son and my daughters, as well as my motivation in other women, just to see them realizing their worth is keeping me from going backwards myself. So it's basically healing and helping others heal, which is amazing, and it's all God's work. Um, so yeah, uh, it's not an easy task though. Don't get me wrong. When you've seen how to make hundreds and thousands of dollars in a quick, fast minute, sometimes when things are getting difficult, you want to revert back to that. And it's not easy to stay solid and stay strong, but it is worth it. The next question is for as far as human trafficking. She wants to know, do you think what happened is your fault? Also, how did you not go crazy? How did you tap out of that reality? A lot of victims don't know that they're victims, which is crazy, I know, from the outside looking in, but a lot of people don't know that they're victims. So human trafficking, a lot of people have the misconception that you can only be trafficked if you're kidnapped or if you're being held hostage, things like that. Human trafficking goes way beyond that. Those are cases that does happen to people, and make sure you pray for those people and their freedom and their safety and their sanity. But human trafficking goes deeper than that. Human trafficking is all a mind manipulation game for the most part. And you can be trafficked thinking that you're out here happy and go lucky. It's when you're being manipulated into doing things that you don't want to do is basically when you're being trafficked, and you're not seeing the results of anything that you're doing. I'm doing all this work. I'm selling my body. I'm selling my time. I'm selling my money, or I'm giving my money to another person. So it's really kind of like when you step back and think about it, like what's going on? Like, where's the money going? What do I have to really show for what I'm doing? Is this really a choice? That's the biggest thing. Is this a choice? And if you really dig deep down, most likely the answer is going to be no, because I don't think there's any person or woman that wakes up and that's their goal in life every day, is to have to constantly play as another person, as another character, and deal with the risk factors that come involved in the life of prostitution. But I think as far as people that are in a situation where they're being trafficked, outwardly, where they are being kidnapped, where they are being held against their will, I think that it's the same as having sex with strangers. I think there's comes a point when you have to tap out and your body goes into survival mode, and all you're praying for is the day that you're free, and it becomes a sort of Stockholm syndrome type of thing. You're dependent on your situation, and that's what the traffickers do and the pimps do. They make you dependent on them so that you don't feel like you're a victim. You feel like you're living the life that you deserve, and that you should be, you should be thankful for the life that you're living. And if you really sit and take time to talk to a victim of trafficking or a survivor, you will really see the sickness of the mental manipulation that goes into it. And I think that you would get a whole nother mind frame of where the victims are coming from, and be really sensitive to the fact that there is so much healing that comes with the women that are lucky enough to get out and to survive and move forward. um, let's see. The next question is, were you ever afraid or afraid often, or were you able to become numb, or was it a progression? Um, I was always scared. At first I was terrified. I had no idea I had no idea what I got myself into. I was terrified. But very, very quickly, I became, I went into survival mode. I became aware of, I became aware of my surroundings, and I became aware of what I needed to do to make sure that nothing happened to me. I became very street smart very quick. I became very just, I became a different person. My whole mind shifted. Um, Not only was I worried about my safety, but I was worried about not making the person that was in control of me upset. I didn't want to upset him. So I wanted to do everything right. I wanted to make sure everything went according to plan so that I didn't have to deal with not only the feelings of doing what I was doing, but the feelings of going home to have to explain that I messed up, or to explain that I did something wrong, and then deal with the punishment on top of the feelings I was already feeling. So, hold on one second. I'm going to take a quick break. Hi. Um, the I think the scariest aspect of anything that I did, because I did everything. I did. Unfortunately, I was forced to do a couple of porns. I did a couple of webcam broadcasting. I worked in the strip club. I worked on the streets. I worked on the web. I did everything. Um, the scariest part, though, was being on the streets, because one, it was unknown to me. Two, I was out of my element. Like I had no idea what to expect. You're getting into other people's cars. They're totally in control. I mean, I had my mace, or I had my knives, or whatever the case is, but I was never in control on the street. And that scared me. And that is where the worst things happened to me, and the worst trauma I think I endured was out on the streets, because you're just out there. You're just a prostitute. You're just a piece of product. Like, nobody's worried about you. Nobody cares about what happens to you. Um, and so I was definitely always afraid. Um, Always. The fear never goes away, but you do get used to it, and your body does go into survival mode. And you do become numb to the world. I did, at least. I became very numb to the world. I didn't care about other people's feelings. I didn't care about what I was doing, how it had a ripple effect. I didn't care that it affected people's families. I didn't care about any of that. My whole mindset was to get my quota for that day, so that I had what I needed: food, a place to stay, and I didn't piss my pimp off, so that I didn't have to deal with getting beat up, or I didn't have to deal with not eating for that day, or I didn't have to deal with not being able to call my kids, or I didn't have to deal with whatever he felt the correct punishment was. So I became very selfish. I became very focused on me and my situation. And I didn't see anything on the outside. I didn't see anything in a man except a dollar sign. Um, all right. Next question. What could have others done to make a difference in your life, such so that you might have not chosen to be a part of that industry? I think the answer for everybody is going to be different, but I think the main thing that you'll probably find is going to be most common is that the women are just seeking love, like whatever love that looks like, whatever, if it's fake love, if it's bot love, if it's surface love, whatever. They just want love. They just want to feel accepted, and they want to feel like they're a part of something. So I think that the prevention aspect comes at kids my age, my daughter's age, at 10, 11, 12, and instilling in them that they are valuable, and that they are worthy, and they are beautiful, and teaching them how to find love within themselves, so that somebody else can't put that in them. So that when they are older and they are questioning themselves and they are growing into themselves and they are trying to figure out where they want to go in life, that they're not seeking that in somebody else, but seeking that in themselves and in their family home and in their mothers and their fathers, their grandmas, their aunts, their sisters, somebody. They just need to know that they have somebody there, and they need to be made aware. You cannot bubble your children in these plastic bubbles and think that all of a sudden when they're 18 they're going to be okay, when they haven't been made aware of anything that the world is going to throw at them. So I think that keeping it real with your kids is A1 important. And next on that list is teaching them how to love themselves. Because if they don't love themselves, somebody else is going to love them. And they're going to rely on that love. Were you aware of the Safe Place programs or houses that are available to help you get out? If so, why didn't you use them? Or are they not as accessible as some people assume, or as reliable as a safe, permanent situation? If they're not a good situation, what do you think will actually be a helpful facility or safe house program? And what would that look like to you? This is a really good question. So let me break it down. I was not aware, this is my personal experience, I was not aware that there was help to get out of that lifestyle until probably 2.5 years into it. But once I found out that there was help, I did try to get help. But the process in trying to get help is so rigorous and so sometimes discouraging that you just kind of give up. And in a mentality of, you have to compare it to like maybe a drug addict. A drug addict wants help, but when you're sitting there listing off all these things like, does this happen? Does this happen? Does this happen? Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? It becomes just really discouraging to sit there and answer all these questions and feel like you're being just constantly poked and prodded at just to get help. So you go back to where your comfort zone is. And when you're made uncomfortable to the point where you just want to give up, it's like discouraging to continue to try to go back. So I tried to get help a couple of times, and I would always leave the situation because honestly, the programs felt like I was leaving my pimp to come to another pimp in just a different way. And so I just left and would go back to the place that maybe wasn't so great for me, but at least like I was wearing nice things, I was making money, I was free to do what I wanted to do to a certain extent versus being held captive. So it felt at that time, being held captive in these houses or being watched 24/7 by people that you don't feel understand. So I think that now that the light is being shined on the sex industry and human trafficking so much more, I think that programs are going to survivor advocates to get ideas and see exactly what would be a good environment to help women out of the industry and to help women be successful outside of it. So that is a great step in the right direction. And I think that will only continue to grow as organizations partner with survivors to get a better understanding of where your mindset is when you're in the game and how they can prevent relapses and prevent women from running back or running away. So that's definitely a work in progress. But I think that the biggest thing with that is just understanding that these women are dealing with so much trauma. It's not going to go away overnight. It's not going to ever go away. It's going to be a constant battle to heal. And these women are really traumatized. And you have to break down every event of trauma so that you can deal with it and heal. And the only way to do that is by understanding and having a compassionate heart. So the overall biggest thing for these organizations, in my mind, is to make sure that everyone is on the same page as far as understanding and wanting the same thing, which is to see these women succeed and find their value within themselves again, outside of the sex industry, outside of those labels, outside of all the negativity. And same for people who want to help and don't know how to help. Just be understanding and understand, just as you would with a homeless person or a drug addict or a teen mom or anybody who's dealing with any type of obstacle to overcome, just understand that you need to put yourself in their shoes and see where they're coming from and really listen. And don't listen to respond. You need to listen to understand. But I do think that the programs are getting to the point where they are trying to make sure that the success rate of women staying out of the lifestyle and running back is higher than it was years ago. The next question is, what would you tell your kids or any children about your experiences? I think that it's important to, depending age appropriately, be very honest with your kids. You don't have to tell them. I think people think that they don't want to bring awareness on this subject to schools because they think of the sex industry and they think of sex, but the sex industry has very little to do with sex. The purchasers, yes, of course, they're looking for sex, but women and the pimps, like, it's business. It's not sex. So it's not like I'm trying to come. If I ask you to let me come to your children's middle school and educate them on sex trafficking, I'm not asking you to let me come in and educate them on how to have sex or how to be a sex worker. I'm asking you to come in and let me educate them on where it is to look for the signs that people are trying to groom you, where it is to look at the signs of a pimp trying to manipulate you or a girl trying to manipulate you to come to her pimp. Those are the things that need to be addressed. And I'm asking you to let me come in and teach these young girls and young boys how to find self-confidence, how to prevent this whole thing from happening before it even happens, so that we don't have to worry about healing people, so that this doesn't become a problem in society. It doesn't continue to grow as a problem in society because we get it before it becomes a problem. So never think that coming in to educate about sex trafficking or the sex industry or how to prevent it is about sex. It is very little, if anything, to do with sex. So that, I think, is a huge understanding. And as far as your kids, you be honest with them, the same as you would about gang violence, the same as you would about predators, the same as you would about rapists, the same as you would about talking to them about going to a party and drinking drinks that they don't have control over, anything like that. You keep it real with them, because if you don't keep it real, somebody else is going to keep it real for you. Believe that. So I just suggest age appropriately, letting them know what's up. Like, that's as much as I can break it down. And answering their questions. Let them ask questions. They got questions, answer them. Next question, what precautionary measures or things should I look for or do so that my daughters are not victims of this industry? What are the signs that they're being lured? Again, this just goes back to being open and honest with your kids, understanding where they're at, what they're doing, not letting them manipulate you, being aware of their social media. Oh my gosh, please be aware of your kids' social media. Like, predators' number one access to children right now is social media. Our kids we used to have to worry about who they came in contact with outside. Right now, social media days, you don't have any control over who they're in contact with. So many people, they don't even know who's looking at them. So you as a parent need to be aware, and you need to understand the signs. Educate yourself. Google, there's articles. Google, there's seminars, there's trainings for you to understand what it looks like when somebody is trying to groom or lure your child. Usually what that looks like on children is that the pimp, the predator, is going to come in and they're going to fill the void of whatever that child is missing. So if you're busy working all the time and your child is always at home alone or always feeling lonely, they're going to prey on that and they're going to fill that time void. They're going to try to make sure that that child feels like that's their best friend. They're going to send in another girl to make sure that your daughter doesn't feel lonely at school. If your child is being bullied, listen to your child, because pimps send their girls into these schools to look for girls that are sitting alone at the lunch table, to look for girls that are feeling down, to look for girls that are looking for a place to fit in. Boys too, don't get me wrong, this happens with boys too, but mainly girls. So it's understanding what is going on with your child, not being too busy to listen, not being too busy or too wrapped up in your own life to understand that your child is feeling lonely or feeling down or feeling bullied or whatever the case is. Listen to your kids because they're telling you something, and be involved in the school. Don't be scared to be that mom who's always up in your kids' business. Be in their business. Because if you're not in their business, trust me, somebody else is in their business. Pimping and hoeing is a huge industry right now. And the younger the girl, the more she sells. Understand that. That's the reality. And these guys that are buying are not asking how old these girls are. They're not asking where their mom is or their dad is. They're not asking if they're being pimped. They're not asking any of that. They're buying, they're leaving, they're satisfied. The younger the girl, the more she sells. Be in your kid's business. And if you need help on understanding the signs of predators and things like that, like I said, email me. I'll send you links. I'll send you links to training. I'll send you connections to people that can help you, that specify, and they are professionals in this area. And never enough information is never enough, bottom line. And the next question is, how long have you been doing this? Are you sad or do you feel no pain? Do you want a cup of coffee or breakfast so we can talk? Do you miss your family? What do you really want for your life? Okay, so the first question, how long have you been doing this? Me personally, I was in the sex industry for 5.5 years, on and off. As far as were you sad, do you feel no pain? I only felt pain when I wasn't using drugs or when I had time to think, which wasn't very often, honestly, because I did have a quota of $1,000 a day, and I was usually busy trying to make sure that I made that quota, so I didn't deal with the repercussions. If I wasn't trying to build that quota, I was the one in charge of trying to make the other girls around hit their quotas. So I didn't really have time to be sad. The saddest that I ever can think of myself being is when I actually had time to sit down and think and be by myself and realize how much I missed my kids and how much I wanted to go home. And yes, I missed my family. I hated that I didn't know who I was anymore. I hated that I had become this person that I couldn't even look at in the mirror. And I don't think that there's any girl in the industry who doesn't miss herself, like just understanding herself and being able to have her own freedom. And some of the girls don't have family, but that's why it's so important as a person trying to be an advocate for these women to be that person that they know cares about them. You have to let them know that they're cared about, because not everybody has kids to motivate them to get out. Not everybody has family. Not everybody has something to motivate them. Some people are very money driven because money is the only thing that has never left them. They always have it. So you have to make sure, as an advocate and as a person with the heart to try to change human trafficking and trying to end the demand on the sex industry and things like that, you have to have a good heart, and you have to pray for these girls, and you have to let them know that you're available. You have to put that in them, that you're not going to abandon them like everybody else. But yeah, it's a very lonely life. The first thing that a pimp does is isolate you. I was not allowed to make phone calls by myself. If I was with my kids, I was being monitored by text messages. If I didn't respond in a certain amount of time, I knew that I was going to be in trouble. It's just this feeling of that's the only person that you can answer to. That person is above God. That's their mentality. They try to get you to think of them above God. And so you lose all your morals. You lose all of your want to go build these relationships with your family because you're embarrassed. And the isolation will kill you. It really will. It will make you sick. And it's really a really bad mind game. And yeah. As far as the last question, what do you really want for your life? That's going to look different for every girl. For me personally, I just want to get to the point where I don't struggle with the mentality of, am I good enough? And I don't know when that point comes. It's getting there, but sometimes the things that I've seen or I've gone through or I've told myself for so long aren't as easy to kick as just switching gears or switching mind frames. So for me, I just want to get to the point where I'm able to help women understand that as hard as it might be, there's another way where you can be living in a good place and know that you're valuable. And I just want to get to the point where I believe that for myself 100%, where I don't question that either, because I can't fully teach that or want to give that to somebody else if I don't believe that in myself. Um, so it's definitely a journey, but that would be my overall goal, to be able to love myself wholly and love myself as God loves me, and also to be able to teach that to my daughters. Um, let's see some more questions. I think this is the last question, unless anyone watching has another question. But the last question is, do you feel that you were targeted or groomed? Do you think that if you were better educated on grooming and targeting methods, that you could have prevented this, or that this could have been prevented? I had no idea that pimps were real, so I had no idea that I was being groomed until just probably a year and a half ago, when I started trying to educate myself on understanding this lifestyle better. I had no idea I was being groomed, but I definitely was. I was definitely targeted as far as being preyed on my weaknesses. Um, I vented to this person, and so he took from what I told him and preyed on that. And that stuck. So he knew exactly what I needed at that moment in my life, at that point in my life, and that's what he decided to offer. So yeah, I definitely think that I was targeted. And I 100% think that if women, if young boys, if young girls are aware of the tactics that predators use and that pimps use to target victims, that they can 100% prevent it. You cannot prevent something that you're not aware of. So I definitely think that the biggest thing is awareness. That's getting into these schools and educating these young girls and boys about dangers, about tactics. Because some of these kids, you could do a training for them and let them know what it is that they need to look for in a person trying to groom them, and a light bulb will go off and they'll say, oh man, that girl, I thought she was my friend, but now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like she's trying to do what this person is telling me, this pimp is trying to do to me. And it's not always so black and white, so don't think it's always just cut and clear. You got to read between the lines. And that's going to come from education. So I'm thankful that the light is being shined on human trafficking and this issue, but we have a long way to go. A long way to go. So I just hope that everybody can get on board, and I hope that everybody does their part anytime that they can to get into the community and really tackle this issue and really tackle this problem, and educate yourself so that you can educate your kids. Because again, the line goes down, 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 down. If we can get to the prevention and the heart of the problem, we can stop having to do all this trauma healing and dealing with all the outcomes of this lifestyle, and we can tackle it ahead of time. And wouldn't that be great to have all these women be able to know how to build love within themselves so that they don't have to go through all these horrible things. I really appreciate everybody tuning in, and hopefully something helped, maybe something clicked. If not, I'm sorry. If I rambled too much, I'm sorry. But hopefully my video that I put out in within the month will answer any further questions and give you maybe other women's opinions on these questions. Thanks for watching, and thanks for hanging out with me. Visit us at www.sistersofthestreets.org to find out how you can get involved with me or any other organizations in the San Diego area to fight human trafficking and help women rebuild their lives outside of the sex industry. I appreciate you, and I will talk to you later. Have a great day.